So, this series we're doing success stories and going around asking sailors their experiences in the Navy. I got about 10, 15 questions here. Shouldn't take too long. So, that being said, I always like to start with what inspires you to join the Navy. Is there a specific reason or a specific goal that you set out to achieve that caused you to join?
So I think just like any kid who's in high school, we always have these ambitions to go to college and do something successful. I think ideally my goal was to end up in a 3-letter agency. I wanted to be a lawyer, but at the time life wasn't quite in my favor. When I was younger, I ended up leaving home when I was 16, and I went to Southern California near China Lake Naval Base. You know where that's at? So that's when I discovered the Navy. Right, I was working at a grocery store that I transferred from where I was working before in Ukiah, California, which is Northern California. So when I went and lived down in Southern California, I was going to school, I was working 2 jobs, and I saw all of this equipment would come on and off the base, and you'd have all these foreigners. They would come to the grocery store, in their uniforms and stuff, and they would park equipment in our parking lot. It was pretty crazy. And then I wanted to do something that was going to give me more money when I was in the grocery store or whatever, because I think the minimum wage back then was like, I want to say like $7.25 or something like that. And I was going through a newspaper, and there was a blind ad to be a trained welder or a firefighter. So I called the number, and like, oh yeah, you need to be 17 or something like that to join or whatever. So I didn't know it was the Navy at first, but the guy on the phone kind of opened my mind to the possibilities of what the Navy can do for you. So I started doing research on it, and then I kind of got fixated on the Navy after that. I ended up transferring from a regular traditional school to one of the schools that you can like an alternative program or whatever, where you can just do packets and get credits.
ALC of sorts.
Mm-hmm. And I got ahead. By the time I was done with I think it was my junior year, I was already, I had already finished what I needed to do for my senior year. And then when that year ended, I ended up going back home because the plan was to go home. I still needed to finish one semester. I was a mid-year, whatever they call it, mid-year grad. And so I went back home, went to a traditional high school to finish out the remainder of my senior year, back to the grocery store that I was working at. I didn't tell anybody about this either. I just kept it to myself. So my whole goal was, you know what? Hey, I'm gonna finish high school as quickly as I can, and then I'm gonna go into the Navy. I'm gonna get educated. I'm gonna go get a law degree, and then I'm gonna go work for the FBI. That was like my ambition when I was younger. And then I ended up graduating in December 2002, and I was in boot camp by the time, actually, I went to boot camp in April of 2003, and I graduated April. I was a push division, so I graduated, I think 6 weeks, and then I was an undesignated seaman, went to Seaman ATD school, and then I was out in the fleet in August of 2003. So by the time everybody had graduated and walked the stage and just, having a good time, I was already in the Navy for a few months, and I was already on the fast track to my goals. So I don't know if that answers the question. It's kind of a long answer, but
No, that's fine. I mean, your initial ambition was to be part of a three-letter agency, so I think we got that out of that. And you're still here, so you've at least made this a career stop.
So I think it happens to a lot of people when you join the Navy, especially. The Navy teaches you like self-pride, like to take pride in the things that you accomplish, and it gives you something that you didn't have before, from a mentality's perspective. And I think when I graduated boot camp, and then when I was in school, I was like, you know what, this is so awesome. I've never felt this free. A lot of people think that when you go into the Navy or to the military, you're owned by the government, but that wasn't how I felt. I felt for the first time in my life I was free. I could do something of importance. I had money in my pocket. I could be comfortable with who I am. Like, I discovered pride in who I was, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do my whole 8 years, because at that time I was thinking, you know, when you sign an 8-year contract, that 4 years of IRR time, somehow that counts towards service. So I was thinking in my mind, I'm just gonna do all 8 years on active duty, and then by the time I'm done, I'm already gonna be graduated from college, and I should be be able to go right into a 3-letter agency. So the question was, why did I make it a career, or what was the question again?
Well, I kind of moved it into how your goals and expectations have evolved. That's typically the next question, but I mean, it was clear that your career choices had shifted. Your expectations for your life had changed.
Because by the time, you know, you do your first tour and it's time for you to, you know, get out or re-enlist, I guess for me, I just felt that if I were to leave the Navy, I was leaving home. You know, I was comfortable. I'm getting paid well. I have more things than I ever had in my life. And then the more I thought about the Navy, I began to think, well, what is the difference between being in the Navy as a career versus being in a 3-letter agency, or, you know, staying in the Navy versus going and becoming a lawyer? So ultimately, I think what ended up happening is what I really wanted is to be happy. I wanted happiness, right? So the Navy fulfilled my ultimate goals, right? It was giving me the things that I wanted in my life, right? It was giving me the importance, the purpose that I was looking for, that I thought that I was gonna need to get from a 3-letter agency. But now being in the Navy, I was already doing that. So my goals and ambitions shifted and focused on staying in the Navy. And I was like, you know, I'm gonna do 20 years. Now I'm at 21 years, and it's like, you know what, I'm not ready to stop. I really like being in the Navy. It's done a lot for me and my family.
So, being an NC and being a chief, what is your role in the Navy, and what does a typical day look like for you?
Ask the question one more time.
Being an NC, being a chief, what is your role in the Navy, and what does a typical day look like for you?
Well, being an NC and being a chief, I guess they're totally two different titles, right? Being an NC is my responsibility to train, mentor recruiters, right, to be successful on filling the gaps in the needs of the Navy. As a chief, I think it's a little bit different. I mean, you still have those same responsibilities, but it goes a little bit deeper, right? Because you're the backbone of the enlisted community, and you're the voice of reason, right? But you're also the voice of, you're like the pendulum, right? You keep the balance on in the enlisted side, right? You fight for your people, or in some cases you have to reprimand them, right? It just depends, right? I'm pretty fortunate that the majority of the sailors that have been under me have been phenomenal, and during constructive criticism, almost every one of them have done something different to course correct.
What does a typical day look like for you?
A typical day, it's, I guess, it's just like what we're doing right now, and if it's not like interviewing, new potential applicants for the Navy, it would be an administrative role, going through records, trying to find and follow up with individuals who had interest in the past. A lot of administrative duties.
What's one of the biggest challenges that you faced over your career?
One of the biggest challenges? If I were to sum it up, I would say one of the biggest challenges that I have had in the Navy is taking care of myself.
And have you overcome that challenge, or is that something that you're working on?
I would say you'd never overcome taking care of yourself. Taking care of yourself is a full-time job, and if you miss a workout, you miss a meal, you say, I'll get to it tomorrow, and you put other duties and responsibilities in front of yourself, even just one time, you kind of fall behind on taking care of yourself.
Sure.
I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned in the Navy is the most important person in each of our lives is the person we look at in the mirror. If we don't take care of that person, it doesn't matter how much you love your kids or your wife or the people around you. If you don't make yourself number one, if you're not your favorite person, then you're not going to be as capable of taking care of other people if you can't even take care of yourself. And I think that's the biggest challenge and lesson that I had to learn in the Navy.
Yeah. I mean, I could agree to that too. The taking care of yourself sets an example for others as well, because if they see that you are making sure you're doing your workouts, sticking to your budget, like whatever the plan you have for your life, it helps set an example. But you can also be a good teaching point when you're mentoring younger sailors. So I would agree that's definitely very important and still a very difficult challenge.
I mean, it goes really deep. I mean, let's say you're on the job doing something, and you have other duties and responsibilities. As a leader, if you don't take a step back and delegate some of the responsibilities that can go to somebody else to take care of, and you keep that on your plate, not only are you affecting other people from growing, you're holding yourself back from growing, and you're compromising what it is you can do for yourself to fulfill whatever makes you happy. Like, it just adds up. It's all the little things.
And I think I could probably answer this one for you, but what's one lesson or value you've gained from the Navy that's going to stick with you for the rest of your life?
What do you think the answer is?
Self-pride.
Self-pride?
You had talked about that a little bit in the beginning there, how finding pride in yourself has helped you.
I think more so, instead of pride, I mean, because pride is a sin, at least for me, right? Too much pride, right? You definitely need to be able to take a step back and be proud of the things that I've accomplished, right? But I think that the most important thing that I've learned in the Navy is you have to have a purpose. Not only do you have to have the purpose, you have to know what your purpose is and then go after the purpose. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people will make when it comes to doing a job, right? A job versus a career, right? Even in a career or a hobby, whatever the case may be, is you go and you do it and you don't know what the purpose is. You don't know exactly what it is you're supposed to do. You don't know the end goal. And a lot of people just float through a job or a community, hobby, whatever the case may be, aimlessly and not knowing what the purpose is, not finding a purpose or asking the right questions to get to the purpose. And when we don't know what the purpose is, then we don't feel that pride or that confidence in what we're doing, and you start to have automatic negative thoughts. So, and that could affect whether or not you enjoy doing whatever it is, being in the Navy, having a family, right? It'll affect every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
So purpose. I think purpose is the most important thing that I've learned.
I mean, and that's definitely true. It's a little like if someone gives you a job in a toolbox, but you don't know how to use any of the tools.
Right.
It's frustrating to try to figure out those and to know what you're supposed to be doing without someone giving you a purpose or finding that purpose yourself.
Or a roadmap or an instruction, right? Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely disheartening when you don't have that purpose, because then you feel like you lose the satisfaction of it. If you have a purpose, you have a goal, you have the satisfaction in meeting those requirements or meeting that goal.
Whatever the purpose is for that company doesn't get really all the way down to
What has been one of your favorite or most memorable experiences in the Navy?
Wow. There's so many. Well, I guess each tour has its own favorite memory, right? Obviously, my first tour, I was on 2 different ships stationed in Japan. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. There's a lot of joy, a lot of disappointment. But I'd say that my first tour, I ended up getting married. So that obviously would be the most memorable thing in my first tour. My second tour was super short. I guess the most memorable thing I have, which was on USS Ronald Reagan, was probably a little bit of hazing. It was pretty strong in the shop that I was at. It was pretty entertaining. And then my third tour, I guess the most memorable. Wow, third tour, I was,
Right.
I earned all of that stuff. That was really memorable, but I don't think none of that trumps having kids with, yeah, that was pretty awesome. Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't say it was the birth portion of it was my favorite. It was actually pretty nerve-wracking, but it was definitely one of the most memorable things that I had, aside from obviously earning some of these nice awards. Yeah. And then I don't know, there's just so many, like each tour is different. Then Guam, and then being overseas, and coming back. I don't know, it's just, I guess one of my favorite places that I've been stationed is actually South Dakota, Rapid City, South Dakota. One of my favorite places. I want to retire there. I don't know if it will, but South Dakota is definitely one of my favorite places.
All right. So you talked about family a little bit there too. So how has the Navy or being in the Navy impacted your family?
How has it impacted my family?
Mhm.
Well, I guess the way that I understand the question is that I would need to know the difference between having a family in the Navy and not having a family in the Navy. And I don't know what that's like. I don't know what it's like to be a civilian and having a family. Vice being in the Navy and having a fun family, what the difference is. What I can tell you is that obviously I wouldn't have my family if it hadn't been that I joined the Navy, right? It's because of the Navy that I have a family, right? Being in the Navy has, I guess, impact, right? The impact that it's had is it's given my family the opportunity for all kinds of different life experiences and cultures. You know, they've been to so many places. I believe, a couple of days ago, my daughter told me that when she was talking to her class, she was under the impression that everybody in the world moved every couple of years. She didn't understand that only a small percentage, I think it's like 4% of the United States is comprised of the military, or those who've ever served, right? So other careers, other individuals, they don't move like we do. And she couldn't comprehend how somebody could grow up in the same place. And she's like, man, that sounds so boring. And it was just really interesting for her to talk to me about the difference in her life and some of the others. You know, it's definitely heartbreaking that every time it's time for us to move somewhere, we uproot them. You know, moving is always stressful. It's one of the most stressful things you can do in the military, and it's painful for the kids because they lose their friends and then they have to go make new ones, right? And that's really heartbreaking for me to watch that. But my kids are really resilient, and I think what's really cool about today's technology is they actually don't lose their friends like, you know, I would have or you would have, you know, 20 years ago, right? Because we didn't have smartphones and things like that, right? It was just, you move that's it, right? My kids still have those connections with the friends that they've made throughout all the places they've been to. On top of that, my oldest son decided to join the Navy, and he's making the Navy a career, and he's really proud and happy to be in the Navy. And he even gave it a shot to be a civilian for 2 years, and he's like, no, there's no way that being a civilian is gonna work for me. Now he's in the Navy. So I'd say the impact that the Navy's made for me is for my family has been a really positive impact.
Good. We got 2 more questions. First is, if you could sum up your Navy career, long as it is, in one word or phrase, what would that be?
One word?
One word or phrase.
Unbreakable.
Because of the song?
Yeah. What depends on what song you're talking about, but.
What song you showed me?
Oh yes, Unbreakable. Yep, I would say that.
Okay. Well, good. Last question. What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about joining the Navy and is hesitant about making that leap? And obviously you're an NC, so that might be a loaded question, but.
Well, I try really hard to be, like the conversation we had earlier about the individual had a different political belief. than we do, right? Or what other people and that individual's it impacted that individual's decision making, right? So what it ended up happening is that individual has decided to let somebody else dictate how they're going to live their life. But if we take kids, for example, what are kids most scared of when they're young? The dark. They're scared of the dark, right? No kid wants to go in the dark. And what is it about the dark people are scared of?
The unseen.
The unknown, right? The unseen, the unknown. Like, you don't know what's in the dark. That's what the Navy is, right? To a civilian. It doesn't matter if they have military background either. So my advice is, life is long. We're gonna be here for a long time. Every person has at least a century to live, right? Serving in the Navy is only gonna be a fraction of that, right? Even if you do 20 years out of 80, 100 years, that's not half, that's a quarter maybe, right? Of your life expectancy. But then there's 3/4 of it, right? Or there's 90% of your life, right? That you're gonna move on, you're gonna live on, right? What's really cool is no matter what happens, right? If you successfully complete one tour in the Navy, you're set up for life, right? There are benefits you will get for the rest of your life. There are benefits that your family will get for the rest of their life, right? So you could join the Navy and absolutely hate it and be disgruntled. Just do the bare minimum. Maybe you don't even go to college, right? You just float through 4 years in the Navy. Once you're done, you're still set up for life. Like, those benefits aren't just for people that are chosen, right? It's for everybody who takes the oath of enlistment, right? So people who are hesitant, what is it that you're scared of, right? One of the biggest things I love to tell people is the biggest mistake that you can make in your life is not make a decision. Either do it or don't, but make a decision to do something. And it's really sad to see so many Americans that decide to do nothing with their life, right? To just float through with mediocrity, right? Because they're so scared to fail. They're so scared to take a risk. I see it all the time where people decide not to join the Navy, and then they'll come back 6 months later or a year later, but then they still won't join, right? It's a dream, right? But that's all it is to them, is a dream. And the closest they get to is a recruiting station. And then what you see them accomplish in life isn't very much. It's because they are always scared to put one foot in front of the other, to walk into the dark and take a risk. We don't know what's going to happen, right? And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you join the Navy and something horrible happens, because the reality is you can't predict the future. So you can go join the military and something tragic happens, or you can go home, on the way home from work, and something tragic happens. We can't predict the future. There's the comfort, you have that comfort, you know what awaits you when you get home. You don't know what awaits you when you go into the Navy. People are always going to be scared to fail. But if you look at the people who are extremely successful in life, they fail over and over and over. The most successful people in the world are the biggest failures in the world, because they failed so many times, they figured out how to be successful. I mean, look at me, like, you know, right? I failed at making chief many times, right? But I didn't give up. I just kept going, right? I'm really blessed to, I don't know how it is I made it, but I'm grateful for it, right? And I could have threw the towel in at 20 years and went home, but I didn't want to give up, right? And by not giving up, I made it, right? And fun fact, that before I made chief, there had only been 122 first classes in naval history that had ever served more than 21 years in the Navy and got promoted to chief, making me the 23rd person in naval history to make chief after 21 years of service. So.
This is an interesting tidbit.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. Well, I think that's all we got. Thanks for your time, Chief. I know you're always busy, so.
Yeah.